Okay, we're ready.
Good late afternoon, early evening. Welcome to a special Oxnard City Council meeting. And the date is September 22nd, 2020. And we'll have the city clerk take the roll, please.
Councilwoman Basua.
Here.
Councilmember Lopez.
Here.
Councilman McDonald.
Here.
Councilmember Madrigal.
Here.
Councilmember Perello.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez.
Here.
Mayor Flynn.
Present.
Mayor, we have a quorum, and the agenda for this special meeting was posted in the City Hall kiosk on Wednesday, September 16th.
Thank you very much. And the tradition at the Oxnard City Council after or following a pledge to the nation is a moment of silence, and we will have our thoughts and very intent prayers for the passing of the Justice of the Supreme Court, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who set an example that transcends the current environment and both nationally and the statewide level. And she was someone of tremendous courage and demonstrated exemplary leadership here in the nation. So all rise, please. And Councilman Madrigal, can you lead us in the pledge, please?
Yes, of course. Please put your right hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States
of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible,
with liberty and justice
for all.
Be seated, please. Okay, so what we'll do now is go straight to item C on the agenda under reports, the city manager department. The subject, informational presentation regarding Measure E, funding for services like Oxnard 9/11 safety, medical response, financial recovery and accountability measure, a local 1.5 cent sales tax to collect funds to be used only for Oxnard. Recommendation is that the City Council receive a public information presentation regarding Measure E transactions and use sales tax measure on November 3rd, 2020 ballot. Funding for services like Oxnard 9/11, safety, medical response, financial recovery, and accountability measure. A local 1.5 cent sales tax to collect funds to be used only for Oxnard. And we'll start with the city manager, please. Mr. Nguyen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm actually going to make two county health safety announcements just because they were timely. So the first one is that on Wednesday, September 30, so that's a week from tomorrow, starting at noon and going through 6 p.m., the Ventura County Public Health Department will be providing free flu vaccine shots at Oxnard College in the north parking lot. Again, that will be Wednesday, a week from tomorrow, at Oxnard College. You can drive up and get a free flu vaccine shot. Just as a reminder, obviously we encourage you to do it, but as a reminder, you want to come wearing the appropriate kind of shirt so you can roll up your sleeve easily and get the shot. So that's announcement one from the Public Health Department. The second one is a public health order update, which basically now allows businesses that sell alcohol to stay open until 11 p.m. Before today, they had to close at 10 p.m. That's now being allowed to 11 p.m., which frankly couldn't have come at a better time for me. I might make it out there tonight. Now, there are a couple of rules. You can only sit outside, of course, with members of your own household. And you're only allowed to be there for about an hour and a half. So that's the updated rules from the Public Health Officials Office. Now, what I'm going to do is provide a quick introduction to the presentation tonight before I ask the city clerk to bring up the PowerPoint. And as this is such an important issue for the city's future, I ask for everyone's patience because I'm going to walk through this slowly, take my time, and then at the end, of course, answer as many questions as possible or necessary. Now, I want to remind the public that I was hired just over 2 years ago. So I've only been here just a little over 2 years. And I was hired to finish rebuilding this city's organization. And at the time, the city council and we all understood that this would take time, that you cannot turn this ship around in short order. Over the last 2 years, we have made significant strides in improving this city and rebuilding the organization. I'm very proud of the city's employees, of the executive team, and also of the city council, who's had to make some very difficult and unpopular decisions. Everyone here has worked very hard in the last 2 years in the effort to make the city better. In my first Oxnard budget, I proposed $9.2 million in budget cuts, which included laying off more than 30 employees. And I recall what a difficult decision that was for this council. And I couldn't appreciate or understand more what a difficult call that was for them. In this year's budget, like for most cities around the country, we were walloped by the pandemic and the ensuing recession. And in our case, it forced us to eat into our already anemic reserves. Now, as of today, our reserves are on extremely thin ice. But there's no getting around the fact that we needed to spend our rainy day fund. And now, with this financial situation, we flat out cannot withstand another emergency or crisis. And that is why I asked the City Council to place Measure E on the ballot, and they did so unanimously. This Measure E is not a referendum of the past, as some people want to make it. Rather, this Measure E is about a choice for our future. I understand that people are frustrated with what's happened at City Hall over the years. But if everyone continues to focus on the rearview mirror, we will certainly crash. I guarantee that. We cannot go back in time and change any of the egregious mistakes made in the past. All we can do is learn from them. I simply don't have a time machine. But we also cannot stand still out of frustration. We have to swim towards the future or we will sink. This is the reality of city government. We cannot stand still. We must keep moving towards the future. We can't take a timeout like a sports team, or we can't cancel the season. Now, we have actually made significant progress over the last 2 years in the areas of financial management, transparency, and accountability. We've also made great strides in organizational development, planning, and overall management and efficiency improvements. I'll give just a few examples, some of which I'll cover later. With the Oxnard Sunshine Ordinance, we have expanded transparency fourfold. All City Hall business and expenditures are now available for public review 12 full days prior to the City Council taking action on them. It used to be only 72 hours prior, but this City Council unanimously expanded that public noticing time fourfold. We received an improved outlook from the Standard & Poor's rating agency. Their 11-page memo provided both encouragement and constructive critique, but the point is they improved our rating outlook. We ended long-term subsidies to the golf course and the Performing Arts Center. We made the tough decision to close the Carnegie Art Museum to save money. We streamlined our permitting process, and we've seen positive outcomes from that. We tighten our contracting and procurement procedures. And of course, we continue to make budget cuts in order to live within our means. We have been living within our means for years now. But I want everyone to make no mistake about this. Our means are clearly insufficient to provide the proper level of services for a city of this size, with its growing population, increasing demands, aging infrastructure, as well as its need to modernize. This is why Measure E is on the ballot for the voters to consider. Again, Measure E is not a referendum on the past, but it is a choice for our future. That concludes my introduction, and I'd like to go through the presentation now. Okay. So this is what it looks like on the ballot. I'm not going to need to read that. Now, here's everything that we are struggling with currently. And this is the year 2020 in California, as is much of the country. We are experiencing multiple crises all at once. We've had, prior to this pandemic, our own structural deficit crisis that had been going on for years. And as I keep reminding people, we are one of the cities that had underlying conditions prior to the pandemic and the recession. Currently, we have fires all over the state, which present the possibility of power outages. Of course, there's the pandemic and its recession. There's the always ever-present earthquake that we may be engaged with. We have had a homeless crisis in California, which we also have to deal with here in Oxnard without any significant funding set aside for that. And of course, there's the existing California housing crisis, which is impacting our city like every other city in California. And to add to this list, we've had to also address the civil unrest related to the Black Lives Matter movement. Fortunately for us, we are not one of the cities that's been violently disrupted or torched to the ground like other communities in the country. And I want to say that that's a true testament to the progress and the hard work of our police department, especially in the areas of community interaction and engagement. Now, a quick review of where we were and where we're heading. And many of you have seen this slide before. But prior to the pandemic, here we go. I can get this highlighter up. All right. I'm struggling with the pointer. Give me a second here. Okay. Until we get the pointer working again, I just want to walk you through the slide from the left to the right. That should be the pointer. So prior to the pandemic, we were already in a fiscal hole. There we go. Over here. So we were already in this hole. And coming into this fiscal year, we were at about a $2 million deficit. But we were reaching stability in terms of we weren't going downwards anymore. We had stopped the decline. But then the pandemic hits and the ensuing recession. So we basically took a nosedive from bad to worse. So instead of climbing out here, we got knocked all the way down here. So now we're in full-on recovery mode. And the last fiscal year, the recession cost us $8.4 million in lost revenues. That's already happened. And the forecast for this fiscal year, which we just started in July, is for another $8 million in revenue reduction. So again, we were already in this hole. We were making an effort to climb out of it. We had stabilized in the sense that we'd stopped the decline, but then we were, like everyone else in the country, we took a nosedive in our revenues. So now we're down here and we're facing recovery. And that's where we have to deal with this year that we're in, expecting $8 million plus in lost revenues. Now, we've been doing a good job in our response to this pandemic. One of my biggest concerns is keeping our frontline workers safe so that they can be on the front lines and provide all the necessary services our city relies on. Now, this slide here uses our police staff as an example, but this applies also to the fire department, also to the staff that collects the garbage, the staff at the water plant, the staff at the sewer plant, as well as the recreation staff. And the big concern for me is because we are so lean in both bodies as well as finances, when we have to just quarantine, because our frontline staff, again, police, fire, garbage, water, sewer, and recreation, they're exposed on a daily basis. And if we have to just quarantine a handful of staff from each shift, it drives us immediately into relying on overtime. And that also provides problems in terms of employee fatigue. Now, again, we've done a good job. Now, as of last week, of our nearly 1,300 employees, we've only had 66 cases of exposure. Of those, only 16 thus far have tested positive, and of those, 12 have fully recovered. So we're doing a good job, but as you can see, this is one of the areas that keeps me up at night, is we just don't have sufficient staffing and we don't have sufficient funds for the backfilling of staff. Over the years, this city, even before I got here, has been making budget cuts year after year. And as you can see here, this is just a graphic presentation of the various departments that have to take cuts, and Cultural and Community Services has taken the lion's share of the cuts over the last 5 years. So again, we have been living within our means. This was our budget forecast for the general fund. And I just want to highlight for people that the forecast has been for operating deficits going into the future. And you can see, if you look at the yellow line here that's highlighted, we're looking at, for this year and next year, and then the out years, the next 3 years, we're looking at $1 million deficits headed into double-digit $1 million deficits. So this is our, if we do nothing different, this is what we're looking forward to. We have a structural deficit problem, period. And it's very similar for Measure O, right? That portion of the sales tax that we get, that's also declining in part because of this recession. So we forecast declining Measure O revenues as well. Now, so what do we do about fiscal sustainability? And here it is, and this is the essence of it. Got to deal with your expenses versus your revenues. So I'm not shy about the fact that our expenses have to do with staff salaries and benefits, including pensions, our supplies and our equipment, and our debt service. This is every city, not just Oxnard. We have to work with economic development in terms of bringing in business revenue. We can deepen our cuts. We continue to cut. I can tell you right now, I've made as many recommendations to cuts as I'm comfortable with in terms of the quality of life in this city. If I'm forced to, I'll be able to make even more recommendations, but it won't be pretty. And of course, there's our revenue, which I'll talk about soon. We can right-size our revenue. And the other thing I want to talk about is the existence of competition, because people seem to think that this city exists in a vacuum, and we don't. We compete with other cities and counties in the region, in Southern California, and in fact, throughout the state. We compete for talent in terms of our employees. We compete for businesses to invest here and, as importantly, to stay here. And believe it or not, we also compete for new residents. So we don't exist in a bubble. We don't exist in a vacuum. What happens in the world around us also impacts what happens to us. Now, in terms of our revenue, this is just a fact. Governments run on taxes. City government, county government, state, federal. In this country, government runs on taxes, not on profits and not on revenue. And for us, taxes make up about 77% of our revenues. But the system that we all enjoy and live in this country is that government relies on taxation to operate, not revenue, not profit. So, as a reminder, where do our taxes go when we pay our taxes? So when it comes to property taxes, for every dollar that's paid, we only get 17.6 cents. The lion's share of property taxes go to the state and the county. We, again, only get 17.6 cents of every dollar. The rest of it goes to the county and the state. It's a similar case with the sales tax. Right now, we get 1.5% of the sales tax in Oxnard. The state and the county get the rest. And it's similar to all cities in California. The cities keep the smallest share, and the state and the county gets the lion's share. Now, this is also really important because there's a lot of misinformation about our sales tax here, as well as what Measure E is proposing. So there is a bracket in California that's enshrined currently in state law. So everyone is at the minimum. Everyone starts at 7.25% for sales tax. And then the maximum is 10.25%. Now you can see here on this chart that there are 482 cities in California. There are over 300 cities, in fact, it's 302, that currently charge a higher sales tax rate than we do. We in Oxnard are currently at 7.75, and that's the minimum plus the Measure O, which is 0.5 cent, which is temporary. So there are over 300 cities that currently have a higher sales tax rate than than Oxnard in California. Now, one thing I want to assure you is that the people who live in these cities up here, the 42 cities that are in the 10% range, and the 127 cities in the 9% range, and the 133 cities in the 8% sales tax range, they don't come here to go shopping in Oxnard because our sales tax is lower than theirs. I can all but guarantee that. Now, let's go to what Measure E would do if approved. So it would bring our sales tax rate up to 9.25%. And what happens if that were to happen is the state and the county still keep their share. It's the same. But the increase, all of it stays here in Oxnard for all the things that we need. When Measure O expires, that rate would drop to 8.75. And we would be back to 8.75, and we would keep not the 3%, but 2.5%. Now, that is important to keep in mind because even at 9.25%, should this be approved, even at 9.25%, there is still going to be over 160 cities in California that are higher than that. And when we drop back down to 8, and 0.75, we would be right in the middle of where the cities are in the state. So I know there's discussion out there saying that we're going to have the highest sales tax in the state, the highest city sales tax, but I offer you a totally different way to look at that, which is we are going to keep the most sales tax local than most of the other cities in California. Many of those cities that pay in the 8s and the 9s and the 10s, most of that gap is going away to the state and the county. They're not keeping it. So even if they're paying 9.25 the way we would be, they're keeping less of it. And that's a really important issue here in terms of keeping our sales tax local, keeping local control. The other thing I can guarantee you is that if we don't fill that gap, eventually the state and the county will, as they've done in many of these other cities. So the bracket is between 7.25 and 10.25. If we don't occupy that space and keep it local, we'll lose it to the state and the county sooner than later. No question about that. So I want to be clear about this. We would not have the highest sales tax in the state. Rather, we would be one of the cities keeping the most of the sales tax amount local. So now I want to move on to a lot of the frequently asked questions that we've received about Measure E. I'm going to start with this one. Why do we need a higher sales tax than, say, Thousand Oaks or Camarillo? Why is it that they have a lower sales tax and their streets are better and their cities look better? Well, the answers are very obvious. So first and foremost, this in Oxnard, we are an older city. Thousand Oaks and Camarillo are much younger cities. They incorporated more than a half a century after us. So they have everything there is newer in terms of their infrastructure. And infrastructure also includes landscaping and trees, not just streets and sewers and light poles and all that, not just the built infrastructure, but also the planted infrastructure. And when their roads and infrastructure were designed more than a half a century after ours, they had better, more modern standards. So they're better equipped than our city is to endure punishment from public use. We are a larger city in population, so we have much greater demands for services and programs than they do. Their property values are much higher than ours. Our median property value is $427,000. In Thousand Oaks, it's $695,000, and in Camarillo, it's $578,000. The taxable property value per capita in Oxnard is only $96,000. In Thousand Oaks, it's $240,000, and in Camarillo, it's $187,000. They are flat out simply wealthier cities. And in terms of the sales tax generation per capita, even though we currently have Measure O and our rate is higher than theirs, we generate $232 per capita, whereas in Thousand Oaks, even with their 1% local, they generate more than that, at 247%. And Camarillo is just below us at 219%, but remember, their population is less than half of ours. Now, it makes sense. They have some high-end stores in Thousand Oaks, like the Apple Store and Nordstrom's, and Camarillo has a premium outlet mall. We don't have those assets. But the bottom line is, it's very difficult to compare our cities without understanding these underlying facts. Next is, where would Measure E money go? And I want to be very clear and transparent about this. It would go to restore the services that we need to adequate levels, and so that we can also have not only the appropriate levels, but also the highest quality. What I would recommend, should Measure E be approved, what I would recommend to the City Council is right here on this slide. I know it's a busy slide, so I want to go through it a little bit. But I also want to point out, there's nothing in here that is extravagant. There's no Taj Mahal anything in here. This is about restoring services. So I want to make sure that we can maintain our emergency response times. I want to make sure that we have enough funding to put into our public safety services, including restoring our paramedic services. We want to restore our landscaping services so that we have proper maintenance cycles in our medians and our parkways and proper cycles for our tree maintenance, as well as adequate watering in our parks and our landscaping. We want to secure our long-term financial sustainability, improve the city's ability to be self-sufficient in order to respond to crises and emergencies, which we're unable to do now. Want to restore proper maintenance of city parks and our other public spaces, restore neighborhood policing, which is one of the best ways to have our police department interact with our community, as well as continue, if we can get the funding, to increase our homeless intervention. Want to restore our various youth programs and seniors programs that we've had to cut drastically over the last 5 years. We can restore proper street paving cycles. We can start for the first time to properly maintain our alleys, and we can get funding bonded to address our seawalls issues. We could also increase our ability, again, to address homelessness. Also, we improve our ability to respond to public health crises such as the ones we're dealing with now, that we're having a tough time struggling with. So this slide here is what I would recommend. Again, I want to point out there's nothing here that is extravagant. This is about our ability to meet the demands of the city of this size and restoring services that have been cut again and again over prior years. We have been living within our means, but the consequence of that is the city is just degrading and everyone's unhappy, including staff and the city council. So next question that I'm asked is, well, what happens without Measure E? So I want to be very blunt and straight to the point, and I'm not painting a picture of doom and gloom. I'm just being very realistic. It just means we're going to have to deepen our cuts. I'm going to have to recommend more cuts because no matter what, the expenses have to match the revenue. We don't have any other options. So here is a menu of the likely cuts that would be coming starting next year. Very straightforward. And again, we're not painting a picture of gloom and doom because we're nowhere near bankruptcy. We would just have to reduce our expenditures. And the only way to do that is to deepen our cuts. You can see an entire menu of options here that would be possible. Now, so the question is, it would be up to the city council, based on whatever staff recommendations would be, to make priorities and choices. So here's an example of the priorities and how I would recommend them. And it's based on what every city has to do, which is to rely on what revenues we have to provide the best public safety we can. So obviously, I would defer any severe cuts to public safety as long as it was possible. So we would start with all the other civil services and civic programs that we provide, whether it's in reducing staff in various departments, reducing more further in the Public Works General Fund, reducing further in our cultural and community services. I'm certain we would close libraries. These things are real. They would have to happen. And as we move from year to year with the forecasted structural deficits, we would continue making these, and they would have to be permanent cuts. And I also want to draw your attention to the bottom of this slide, which shows you where our reserve is. This is our rainy day fund. It's already, as I stated, it's anemic. It's extremely low. We are on thin ice. And as that slide says, this is not good. So whatever we do, we still have to keep, even at a minimum, the smallest possible reserve should another emergency occur. So this is, again, if I'm forced to recommend cuts, this is a snapshot of how it would be prioritized. Now, this is based on the forecast we had recently. We don't know yet the extent and the length and the depth and the breadth of the current recession. We just don't know. So these numbers could change for the positive or for the negative. So I want to make that clear. This is just a forecast, but I just want to show you of the kind of sequence that I would recommend. Further, there are items right in front of us with no funding whatsoever that we have to tackle. Some of these, regardless of what happens with Measure E, we're going to be confronted with, and that is the aging out of the seawall infrastructure in the harbor, the water quality issues there, the 70 miles of alleyways that we have that we've never had any funding set aside for, and the homeless crisis. These are things we're going to have to contend with regardless of what happens. We can't avoid these items. Next question I get is, well, how can we trust you because you've misspent Measure E? So I really need to correct that narrative, because upon my review of everything that's occurred in Measure E, I can tell you Measure E was not misspent. I'm sorry, Measure O was not misspent. So Measure O was passed in 2000. AEIOU. Measure O was passed in 2008. We all know, I mean, we can't possibly have that short of a memory. What happened back then? This country experienced the greatest recession since the Great Depression. So I challenge anyone to fathom that somehow Oxnard, the city of Oxnard, or Measure O, was immune from the Great Recession. It was not. We were not. So Measure O essentially became a life preserve for the city. That's what happened. Now, when you look at where Measure O funding went, you can see it went into the right categories. What happened was it went at different proportions due to the recession. That was necessary to keep the city and the most essential services afloat. Now, I want to read to you the language from the Measure O ballot question. And it said, to protect, maintain, and enhance. I think that's the word that has people upset, is that they were expecting enhancements and all they got was the basics. But it says to protect, maintain, and enhance vital services, including police, fire, emergency response, increasing street paving / pothole repair, to improve traffic flow, expanding youth recreation, after school and anti-gang prevention programs, acquiring property for parks and open space preservation, upgrading stormwater drains, improving senior services, increasing code compliance, and other general services. Well, over the years, Measure O spending did go to these buckets. Again, it just went in different proportions than what everyone had hoped for. But at the time, no one understood the impact of the Great Recession. So I just have to remind everyone, Measure O became a life preserve for the city. It was well spent. It was not misspent. It just didn't have the juice to do enhancement, but it was the juice this city needed to preserve the most basic services. Next question I'm asked, how can the city be trusted with increased revenue? And I'm just going to say flat out, the city can be trusted because we've made significant improvements. And now on this slide are just 20 highlights of reforms and improvements, and I'm going to talk about a few of them specifically. We have, as I stated earlier, in terms of finances, we've made some great strides, and I'll get to that on the next slide. I want to highlight here, though, that we've streamlined our permit process, and it's yielded results. I stated in my introduction, we ended the subsidies at the golf course and the Performing Arts Center, and unfortunately, we closed the museum, all to save money. And we've made a slew of other improvements across the city, which you can review later on the rest of this slide. Now, in terms of our financial management, this is very important. So in 2015, the financial audit that year found 65 findings of material weakness in this city. That's an astonishing number. Now, this current year, our financial audit, which is done independently by an external audit firm, returned 0 new findings of material weakness. So since 2015, our finance department, our management team, and our city council has made significant progress. We've gone to a financial audit, an annual financial audit that gave us 65 findings of material weakness down to 0 new findings of material weakness. As a result, Standard & Poor's, the rating agency, gave us an upgrade in our outlook. And I'm going to quote from their memo, which I stated earlier, provided positive review as well as good constructive critique. But their rationale from improving the city of Oxnard's rating outlook from stable to positive, it's a small improvement, but it is a tangible improvement. The rationale stated such that S&P Global Ratings revised the outlook to positive from stable and affirmed its A issuer credit rating on Oxnard. The outlook revision reflects our view that the city's refreshed management team is helping the city to build on progress it has made during the past 3 years in addressing management deficiencies and opportunities on what appears to be fading political acrimony regarding how the city sets and uses wastewater rates. We see a lack of auditor findings in the city's most recent financial statement and its willingness to address structural budgetary challenges ahead of a potential future recession by making staffing reductions for the fiscal 20 budget as the most salient indicators of an improved organizational structure. We see potential to raise the ratings by 1 or more notches during the next 2 years should the city's new management team effectively wield and strengthen financial management policies and practices, particularly if we see gains in other areas such as a swing to strong financial performance and continued tax-based growth. Now that comes from Standard & Poor's. We also had a positive letter from our external auditors. I'm not going to take time to read that today. And also, as a result, we were able to refinance our gas tax bonds, which are currently saving the city $400,000 a year. I want to remind everyone that when I got here, my first week on the job, that week, the incumbent chief financial officer had resigned. So I spent a better part of my first year seeking out a highly qualified chief financial officer. And we were fortunate to find such a person in Mr. Kevin Riper. And we also found an outstanding assistant chief financial officer in Ms. Donna Ventura. They have made tremendous progress on the front of managing the city's finances in the short time that I have been here. So I feel very, very grateful for all of their hard work. And again, we've made significant improvements in this area. How is the city increasing financial transparency? We've also made significant improvement here. A couple things I want to point out is we now have on our website a portal where you can dig in as much as you'd like to the city's finances. And it's a very simple web address there, oxnard.org/finances. And you can see the finance portal where you can view all of the city's funds, and you can view it in different ways. So if you want to see pie charts, you can see pie charts. If you want to see line graphs or bar graphs, you can see those. You want to compare it year to year or quarter to quarter, you can probably do that too. In the past, the city's budget's always been available on the website, but as a very, very, very long, multi-hundred page document that's hard to sift through. With this new tool that we've recently implemented, you can really dig into it easily at your leisure and in the fashion that's most easily understandable to you. So that's available now online. And the other thing we've done is with the passage of Measure B, which the public approved, I believe, by 82%, we have helped to minimize the influence of special interest here at City Hall with Oxnard's first set of campaign finance reforms. So I'm very proud of these accomplishments over the last 2 years. Next question, why doesn't the city focus on economic development instead of raising taxes? Well, the answer is we have focused on economic development, but business revenue alone cannot save us from the structural deficit that we have. And I want to look at a few things here in terms of recent accomplishments. Again, all this information is available online. It's been available online for a couple of weeks now, so people can always review these in detail. I'm not going to go over every item on some of these busy slides, but we are finalizing our cannabis policy. That will help. The city council updated the city's development impact fees recently, and that was done for the first time in decades. Some of these fees that were on the books since the 1970s. A little bit astonishing to me, but we tackled the issue and we've done it. Sakioka Farms is a major, major accomplishment, right? We've been working with the family for years, and in part due to our persistence, their persistence, and our streamlining of our permits, we got them across the finish line in terms of having a finalized and signed development agreement and a tract map after nearly a decade of effort. And a lot of work goes into all of this. And it's related to another question, which I'll address later, when people say, well, we pay taxes and we don't see where it goes. And I'm going to get to that. But here I can also share with you, to get these efforts across the finish line requires hundreds of hours of staff work, hundreds of hours of negotiations, engineering review, planning and zoning review, fire safety review, legal review, county and state permitting efforts, as well as FEMA review. There's a lot of work that goes on that you just don't visually or visibly see out in the public, the way you notice the things that aren't going well, like the landscapes. So associated with the question, well, why are you asking for Measure E when we already pay taxes and we can't see where it goes? And I know that that's easy rhetoric and born out of frustration. So I just want to remind everyone where your current tax dollars go. This slide is very busy, and it's just the highlights. It is just the highlights of where your tax dollars go. So you want to start in the upper left with the police. So this is from last year. We had over 100,000 calls for service of our police here. We had over 6,800 persons booked for misdemeanors and arrest. Our police responded to over 4,300 domestic disturbances. We responded to over 4,000 alarm calls. We responded to over 6,600 calls related to homelessness and vagrancy. We responded to over 5,000 calls about violent crime, including murder, rape, robberies, assaults, and some property crimes. We responded to over 5,500 traffic collisions. And unfortunately, we issued over 21,000 traffic citations, including over 750 DUIs. Now, moving over to the fire department, over 20,000 calls for service, more than 1,500 traffic collisions, over 100 vehicle fires, 421 structure fires, nearly 15,000 medical emergencies we responded to. 8,600 of those were high medical emergencies, meaning strokes or cardiac arrest. Over 540 calls just for fire, 34 calls for hazmat, hazardous materials responses, and we participated in over 20,000 hours of training, which is required by law. Our community services last year, our libraries experienced over 380,000 visits. City Corps services served opportunities for youth, 97,000 opportunities for youth. We worked with our school districts and we served over 28,000 summer lunch programs for kids here in the city. Our senior centers had over 56,000 visits last year, and our youth centers had over 15,000 kids served. After school programs, over 32,000 kids. Public Works is where we get a lot of complaints, in part because we just don't have enough revenue. A couple things I want to highlight. We were able to repair 19,000 square feet of sidewalk. It's not a whole lot in a city that has as much as we do and as old as it is. We were able to repair over 9,000 linear feet of water mains. That is significant. Those water mains are old. Most of them, or if not all of them, the original are cast iron and they will not last. And when they go, that causes major problems. And just another highlight, we had over 37,000 cleanings of our public restrooms. And I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but it is a lot. Now, again, when people say to me, where do our tax dollars go? These are the highlights. There aren't in the highlights here the things that you don't see that go on behind the scenes that support all of this, that allows all of this to happen. I also want to highlight just in this past week, since we've continued this meeting, our police department has had 3,311 calls for service. They've made 113 arrests this past week. They've had to address 7 assaults with a deadly weapon, including 3 stabbings. They've responded to 9 drug overdoses, including several where they had to administer, our officers had to be hands-on and administer Narcan to bring the patient back to life. They've had to address 2 attempted suicides and 1 dead body that was discovered. Our fire department, just this past week, has responded to 475 calls. 21 of them were for fires. 33 were for trauma/rescue. 5 were for cardiac arrest. There were 112 in the category of high medical responses, and 12 were in the high plus. Overall, they responded to 242 medical responses this past week. And of the 475 responses, 349 of them were to census blocks in Oxnard that are categorized as low and moderate income communities. And they also responded to 33 traffic collisions. Also recently, our Public Works Department has been busy continuing when it's possible with homeless encampment cleanups. And in September, we're working on a dozen homeless encampment cleanups across the city. This is where your tax dollars go on a daily basis. And the thing is, it's still not enough for all the services that are demanded and all the programs that people should have. It's still not enough. Our housing department in the last few years has done an extraordinary job in terms of addressing the homeless crisis here in Oxnard. When I got here, Oxnard, like many other cities, was in the mode of playing whack-a-mole in addressing homelessness. In essence, we were utilizing general fund dollars, primarily with police and public works, to chase homeless individuals around the city. We have since then made a conscious effort to invest in solving the homeless problem, not just chasing it around, but to actually be focused on ending people's homelessness. And there are two projects that we're working on right now that would represent actual significant progress in addressing our homeless crisis here in Oxnard and ending homelessness for hundreds of people. So with the potential of the Homeless Solution Center downtown that will have 110 beds as a shelter, 56 housing units, and also include clinical spaces, clinical office space. In addition to the potential of the Project Home Key, which is the Vagabond Hotel on Oxnard Boulevard, which is being driven in partnership with the county and entirely funded by the state, that could yield 70 rooms for permanent homeless housing. Between those two projects, when they are up and running, should we succeed, they will allow us to actually get up to 300 of our homeless individuals off the streets. That's half, if not more than half, of the homeless population in Oxnard. I guarantee you that will make a tangible, concrete impact, positive impact. We will feel it, we will see it, we will be relieved of the burden of the various nuisances unfortunately caused by the housing and homeless crisis. My point here is we are doing the best that we can, and we are making efforts at improving the scenario here in Oxnard. Next question I'm asked often: how would this sales tax impact lower income residents, especially those who are unemployed right now during the pandemic? So the first thing I want to point out is that the sales tax is not applied to the most essential household budgets, which are groceries, prescription drugs, utilities, or rent. So the most basic essentials for every family is not taxed by the sales tax. The other point on that is that the sales tax is not only paid for by our residents. In fact, we have data that shows that at least a quarter of our sales tax is paid for by people who come here to work during the day, as well as people who visit here. So the sales tax is paid by non-Oxnard residents as well. Now, this is really important, this slide here, because I believe this is counterintuitive, but it is really true. And that is that it's actually the least wealthy in our community that needs our services the most. And our services cannot be provided without proper revenue. So I've reported to you before that unfortunately culture and community services have taken the lion's share of the cuts over the last 5 years, whether it's in library services, city core programs, youth and senior programs, or having to close the art museum. They've taken over $5 million in reductions in the last 5 years. But the thing is this, our low-income families cannot afford to pay for after-school programs. They cannot afford to pay for expensive summer camps. They cannot afford to pay for expensive tutoring services. And our seniors, many of our seniors cannot afford to live in fancy or private expensive senior facilities. So they need these services, and they are actually harmed by when we don't have the revenue to provide these services. So this sales tax is the least painful way for all of us to pool the revenue so that we can provide these services for the people who need them most in our community. And I know that's counterintuitive, but it's a fact. It's the least wealthy are harmed the most when these services are cut, not the people who can afford the cuts the most. Next issue is about the pensions. Is Measure E just going to deal with our pensions? And the answer is no. So with Measure E, the 1.4 million out of the forecasted 40 is what would be going towards pensions. So it's certainly not the bulk of it. Now, a couple things to remind everyone of here. The city provides services and programs, and we do that predominantly via employees, via human beings. We are not using robots to provide the many programs and services that the city demands and deserves. So as an example, people talk about the need for adding mental health workers to our staff in order to better address the homeless situation. Well, mental health workers mean people. So if we want to do that, we would be adding to that if that's the case. Now, the pension issue is also important to point out that it is part of the employment process for the city and has been for decades. And the governor, back in 2013, Governor Brown did implement what is known as PEPRA, the Public Employees Pension Reform Act. And when he did that, it was a major accomplishment to right-size the state's pension obligations. But he also made it clear that it would take time to really have the impact, the desired impact. It's a generational issue. So the good thing in Oxnard is that we're, like most other cities, we're making progress. So the bulk of our pension obligations currently actually go to more people who've already retired than to active employees. Just a little bit more than half of it goes to people who are already retired. Now, in terms of what we call the PEPRA employees, the employees who pay more of a fair share towards their retirement, who are provided a less generous pension formula. Since 2013, since PEPRA was enacted, we've already have 35% of our employees today are PEPRA employees. So we're making good, sound progress here. The pension program and the pension obligation debt is going to work itself out over time, just as Governor Brown had told us it would. It's a generational fix. It takes time. Next issue, will Measure E help us with street repairs? And the answer is yes, because it will provide us with the necessary revenue. So as a reminder, we have a lot of infrastructure in this city, and it's very old. There are more than 1,000 lane miles of roads that we have to maintain. And our only sources of funding are the gas tax and our general fund, including Measure O. We have 650 miles of sidewalk to maintain in this city. Same funding sources, gas tax and general fund and or Measure O. And we have 70 miles of alleys to maintain, which we don't have a fund set aside for, but it would have to come out of general fund and or Measure O. And currently, there's nothing there for that. We need to improve our roads, and we have a plan and the ability to do it, but we need the funding in order to do it. Bottom line is we can't do it with the funds that we have now. So currently, our pavement condition index is in the low, very, very low 60s, and we're underfunded for road maintenance. That's the reality. And our goal is to get up to a 70 in terms of the report card, the pavement condition index, but that takes a lot more money. That's just a bottom line. If we don't have the revenue, our roads will continue to degrade. It's very straightforward. What about the Measure E oversight provisions? And is Measure E a blank check? So a couple things I want to point out. First and foremost, no, it is not a blank check. If Measure E is approved, I can't take the money and go buy a yacht or anything extravagant. We can only use the money for the municipal services allowed under the law. And all of those expenditures go through public hearings, go through city council committee meetings, which are all public meetings, as well as a formal budget hearing, all public. And with our sunshine ordinance, all that information is made available 12 days prior to the city council taking action on any of those expenditures. Again, thanks to the city council and passing the sunshine, the Oxnard sunshine ordinance, all of that information is now available 12 days in advance. We also implemented the city council committee system, which provides subcommittees of the council to spend more time to focus on these issues, and the Finance and Governance Committee will be able to spend more time on the proposed budget. And we actually discussed that this morning, and the committee made it clear that they want to get the information about the upcoming budget season earlier, which we will do. Also, with Measure B in place, it helps to prevent undue influence by lobbying or advocacy in terms of trying to influence budget priorities. So the checks and balances are in place, not to mention the year-end budgets and the fact that it's all available online at the new financial portal. But the bottom line is there's plenty of accountability and transparency already built into the system, and it can work, it should work, and it's our job, all of us, the city council and the staff, as well as the public, as well as our residents, to ensure that the system works. And as I've stated before, this is not a spectator sport, local democracy. We all have to be engaged and involved. And there's a larger question of who's accountable. Well, I am accountable. The city manager is accountable. The elected officials are accountable. And in a more abstract and broader extent, the public is accountable for holding their public officials and me accountable. It's all related. These are all a two-way streets. There's no one-way street here in terms of making sure everything is above board at City Hall. All of it is a two-way street between all of us. But I want to assure you, there is no blank check here. what we can spend as a municipal government, there are very, very, very rigid rules to that. Next question. Well, why doesn't Measure E sunset? So I want to draw your attention again to the budget forecast that shows the drastic structural deficit in the out years. So we know of the deficits facing us in the out years, right? In 22, 23, 23, 24, and 24, 25, we're looking at double-digit million-dollar deficits. So while it might have been easier for me to propose something of a lesser amount or something that sunsets similar to Measure O, it also would have been irresponsible of me because I would have been kicking the can down the road. Had I done that, I would have simply set up the same fiscal crisis for another city manager down the road, another city council, and it would frustrate the public to no end. The facts are what they are. Our revenues do not meet the demand of the city. We need to right size the revenues. So it does not sunset because we can't afford for it to sunset. We simply need to right size the revenues in order to restore services and provide the adequate amount of programs and services that this city demands and also deserves. So again, I didn't want to do the easy thing or the irresponsible thing. This is what we need in the long run. And all you have to do is review the prior budgets and look at the prior cuts and look at the future forecasts to understand that we have a structural deficit. Now, in summary, if Measure E is approved by the voters, it will bring our sales tax rate to 9.25%. And then when Measure O sunsets in 2029, which is its current schedule, unless it's forced to sunset earlier, it would bring our sales tax down to 8.75. And the key thing is the incremental increase, all of it stays here in Oxnard for us to use for the services and programs that we need. None of it goes to the state or the county. This is also about local control of our tax dollars. So it would put us back, when Measure O sunsets, it would put us back just under the line between 8 and 9%. It would basically put us in the middle of the state, not at the top, in the middle of the state in terms of our sales tax rate. Now, I want to remind everyone, all the people who live and work in those more than 300 cities that have a higher sales tax rate than ours right now, they do not come here to shop in Oxnard because our sales tax is currently lower than theirs. And even if Measure E is approved, as you can see, again, that line that shows where Oxnard would be, we wouldn't get in to those top cities up there. We wouldn't even be in the 9s and the 10%. We'd just be at the halfway mark in terms of the sales tax rates across California. So bottom line, if it is approved, we get to restore a host of essential services and programs. We get to keep it local. And the last thing I want to say, Mr. Mayor, before I turn this back over to you, is I did not ask for this to be put on the ballot as a referendum over the past. This is about a choice for the future of Oxnard. Thank you very much. Back to you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Nguyen. And we do have a series of speakers here this evening. And so what I'd like to do is begin by reading out the names of the first 10 speakers that will be called. and the very first list, and I'll call them two at a time thereafter. So the very first speaker will be Pat Brown, then Tom Cady, Barbara Macri Ortiz, James Aragon, Ray Blattell, Lawrence Paul Stein, Christopher Williams, Michael Amalia, Larry Barberine, Steve McNaughton, and Douglas Partello. So we'll start with Pat Brown to be followed by Tom Cady, please.
And Mary, you're granting the full 3 minutes, right?
That is correct.
Thank you. Hi, Pat. 3 minutes. Please begin.
Yes. Can I begin?
Yes, go ahead.
I am involved with the fire department through all the neighborhoods, getting together, having representatives to meet with the fire department. We had been doing it about once every month or every 2 months for a meeting to try to bring us all up to date and everything so that we can then help our neighborhoods, inform them and help our neighborhoods to work with the situations at hand, whatever emergencies there were, earthquakes, etc. And help to train everybody as to what you do when an emergency happens and so forth. But that has been cut off, and I'm wondering if we could, because of funding, and I was wondering if we could possibly get some help with this Measure E to help to restore this program back again that we had to cut in the summer. If we could get this program going again. We all, of course, are donating our time and everything, so we're not paid, except the fire department people are paid to help us, to inform us, and to give us handouts and things like that we can then take and distribute in our neighborhoods, and help to educate all the new people coming into the neighborhoods so that they can be up to date with everybody else. So that's the goal. And I'm wondering what the city can do. I'm going to hang up and you can make comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Tom Cady, to be followed by Barbara Macri Ortiz, please.
Hello.
Hi, Tom. Hi, you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, Council. This is Tom Cady, and I'm a retired Assistant Police Chief, and I'd like to expand a bit on the comments that the City Manager made in his presentation regarding the importance of community policing and the relation to other community services and programs. While I was on the department, and since I retired, I've been a strong advocate for community-based policing. Successful community policing, though, requires two key components. One is sufficient staff on behalf of the police department, and key community organizations and partners for them to connect with to do services that the police department shouldn't do or can't do. We need to invest in additional officers. Our level has been cut back to 2011 levels of staffing, and community policing is staff intensive. To maintain the partnerships and work with the community, you have to follow through on your commitments, and not having the officers to do that creates a challenge both for the police department as well as those community-based organizations and neighborhoods they work with. We also need to develop and expand on programs to address the underlying problems that contribute to crime and disorder. This can't be an either-or proposition. We can't take away from youth programs or senior programs and give it to the police department, and we can't take away from the police department to put it to other programs. We deserve the kind of services that a city our size needs, and we need to fund those. Through our partnerships with the county, we need to make sure that we have services for the mentally ill as well as drug and alcohol programs. But those partnerships, once again, require a commitment on the city side to make sure they yield to long-term success. Dealing with housing and homeless, we know that over the past that when there's been a focus on a critical area like mentally ill or prisoners returning from prison, there's an effort that extends for a period of time, and then attention moves to something else, and then state and county funding goes away. With Measure E, we have the money that we can sustain the effort. We can determine the priorities, and we can continue those efforts even if the attention other levels of government pass away. A safe community requires a long-term investment in public safety services, community services, youth services, and I hope the public will join me in voting for Measure E and being sure, one, we have sufficient funding, as well as we have the local control for that funding. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker, Barbara Macri Ortiz, to be followed by James Aragon, please.
Hi, Barbara. 3 minutes. Please begin.
Are you starting?
Yeah, go ahead.
I guess I'm on a different. Good evening, Mayor Flynn, Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez, and council members. City Manager Nguyen, I'd like to thank you for that thorough presentation. My name is Barbara Macri Ortiz, and I have been an Oxnard resident for over 30 years. I wish to speak in support of Measure E and urge my fellow citizens to join me in voting for this tax increase. No one likes taxes, and taxes are a favorite thing to complain about. But I think that it is time for us, for those of us who love our city and who plan to continue to live here, to raise our families here, and to grow old in this city, to step up and take ownership of our own future and do what needs to be done to ensure that our city survives and thrives. We are very lucky to finally have in Alex Nguyen a competent, creative, and realistic city manager to guide us into this very uncertain future in light of the economic and human disruption that we are experiencing because of the coronavirus pandemic and the recession it has triggered. Thanks to the honesty and transparency of our city manager, we have finally learned in no uncertain terms about the financial state of affairs in our city. We want and need the services that we have grown accustomed to. The cuts we saw to the PAC and the Carnegie were brutal, but necessary. I want to thank the city manager for making the difficult decisions in his budget recommendations that were necessary. But more important, the city manager was not content to just stop there. The proposal for Measure E is the logical action that we must take now in order to move our city forward into this economic reality that we face. We want services, but nothing is free. We must step up to the plate to pay for these services. I have been to other jurisdictions where the sales tax rate is much higher than Oxnard's. No one really complains when they buy lunch or do some shopping because it is the cost of running the city in an environment where much of the tax revenue is siphoned away from the city unless the citizens take the proprietary step to tax themselves, making it possible to keep the sales tax revenue in their city. The key to keep the sales tax revenue in Oxnard is Measure E. Measure E does that, keeping the sales tax revenue here. We need to be ahead of the curve. Rates are eventually going to go up, and for those jurisdictions that do not tax themselves, that tax revenue will leave their cities. We need a robust fund for Oxnard to thrive. Measure E is the way to get there. Again, I urge you, all of my fellow citizens, to vote yes on Measure E, and I thank you for the opportunity to speak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is James Aragon, to be followed by Ray Platel, please.
Hi, James. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Good evening, everyone. James Aragon here, and I guess I'll be the first downer here. So the city needs to have strict priorities where needs and wants are clearly delineated. I would not be here publicly, whether or not I voted for is one thing, but I wouldn't be here publicly protesting against Measure E if it read in a way that prioritized needs. The police, firefighters, roads, all needs funded by the general fund. These are things we all benefit from, but Measure E provides no guarantees, and the revenues will flow wherever the city council decides. The city council, not just city council, but city councils going back decades, have had a problem, and that problem is this allure to living, what I would say is paycheck to paycheck. Just stems from wanting to do anything and everything. And because there's no true lock box type of prioritization, it cuts everywhere instead of, again, prioritizing the things we need, police officers and firefighters. The city has a bad habit of investing in projects, but not setting aside downstream capital needs. It is predictable that roofs will need repairing. It is predictable that park watering infrastructure will need replacing, and it's predictable that seawalls will someday need to be updated. But the city has not set aside specific funds to dedicate to these things. When these needs come about, then there's an emergency and there's a panic because the city wants to do everything. We cannot blame recessions, whether created by overheated housing markets or Governor Newsom. Like roofs, recessions, both light and severe, come and go. While the timing is not precisely predictable, that they will come is not disputable. If a city has $500 million in revenue, it should be spending $450, and the rest for when a recession comes, so they can mitigate cuts and lessen the impact. I really believe that this was not done wisely. 40% or 15, 20% dedicated to police, 20% dedicated to firefighters, 40% dedicated to roads, and the rest go in the general fund, then I don't think there'd be so much concern because you'd have a dedicated, mandated requirement to spend the money on the things people want, that everybody wants, not just a particular population. So I urge everyone to vote no on Measure E. And there are measures on the ballot, Measure F, L, and N, that will all improve the city. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Ray Blattel, to be followed by Lawrence Paul Stein, please.
Hi, Ray.
Hello?
Hi, you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Thank you. Mayor and council members, it was mentioned earlier this evening that the city ended subsidies to the golf course. No, you didn't. I have data from the city from contract inception to March of this year, and this was pre-pandemic, so it's probably worse now. You are supplying more money to the golf course than you get back. And you can call this as ending the subsidy? I don't think so. The following comments pertain to the city manager's briefing. The title of this briefing and the title on the actual ballot measure include the word accountability. Wasn't accountability already covered by Measure B? Is this just a buzzword that you like to throw around? How many measures does it take to make this city accountable? Public welfare, health, and safety. 1-for-1 overtime shift for every absence. This is, and always was, and always will be the case due to the liberal nature of the public safety contracts. Again, overtime is homegrown. You don't need a COVID-19 outbreak or a no vote on Measure E to witness excessive overtime in the public safety sector. It's guaranteed now and in the future either way. Year-over-year budget cuts. For next fiscal year, the proposed budget for the general funded police personnel increased by 5%. The proposed police retirement budget increased by 18%. The city manager's proposed budget increased by 66%. The city attorney's proposed budget is over $200,000 greater. So where are these budget cuts? Budget forecasted for the general fund. Note that for all years posted, the percentage increase in expenditures is constantly greater than the forecasted revenue. If you ever hope to recover, your expenditures should be less than revenue. Economics 101, people. Plus the data shown is dated June of this year. This financial data is 3 months old. Comparing Oxnard to Thousand Oaks and Camarillo. Per the city's chart, the per capita revenue generated by the existing sales tax for Oxnard is greater than Camarillo's and just slightly less than Thousand Oaks. And look at the difference in the three cities. Obviously, Camarillo and Thousand Oaks have much better money management and priorities. Proposed Measure E spending. Retaining and attracting local businesses and jobs. I don't think you know how to do this. You have yet to successfully demonstrate this capability. Restoring city infrastructure, well, you just now started to do that, and you got a poor historic track record. Will the city misspend Measure E like it did in Measure O? Well, you probably will. Can the city be trusted with increased revenue? I seriously doubt it.
30
You
seconds.
mentioned audits. What has the city done with the public safety overtime audit recommendations? The city actually agreed with most of the audit recommendations, but will anything change? Probably not. Status quo at the best. Most of the revenue increase would obviously go to salary increases and retirement benefits. Measure E oversight provisions. Measure O has an oversight committee and it's useless. It has no teeth. All Measure O spending is reported to the oversight committee and the public after the fact, after the money has been allocated or spent. What good is this? You've got zero influence.
Time's up.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Lawrence Paul Stein, to be followed by Christopher Williams, please.
Hi, Larry. You have 3 minutes. Please begin now.
I'm very disturbed by the disingenuous of the city manager. He speaks not the truth. I attend public hearing meetings. I ask questions. I ask questions sometimes a week in advance in writing, and I cannot get answers to my questions. Fire Station 8 was approved by City Council. $20 million for Fire Station 8 in 2012, when 2005 was only going to cost us $2 million. Where's the transparency in that? We talked about coal compliance in Measure O. Coal compliance was not increased, even though the city manager seemed to think it was. It was not increased. We cannot see the monthly expenditures. For example, I cannot see the expenditures for legal services. Why is staff preventing me from seeing legal services? I cannot access on the website. We had a report on developer impact fees. The impact on water was not discussed in the developer impact fee report. We need a special tax. A special tax allows us to have some control how revenues are going to be spent. With Measure E has no controls on how it's going to be spent once it hits the general fund, because it's set upon the city council to decide how they want to spend it. Like they decided to spend $20 million on a fire station when a fire station could have cost us $2 million. Again, Measure E is a general tax. What we need is a special tax. I suggest we vote no on Measure E because we don't have controls. The public does not have controls in this matter. We ask questions, we do not get answers. Halco, for example, I've asked questions about Halco, a radioactive waste site. There's been no communications presented to me that I've asked for on what the city council has done with Halco the last 4 years, let alone last 2 decades. Again, radioactivity, people have radioactive poisoning from going to Halco, and we hear nothing about it. I talk about increasing social services. If we cut 10 police officers, we increase 15 social workers. Yes, 10 less police officers, but the police officers cost a lot more than social service personnel, and we have better services. 80% of the calls to service by the police department are for drug addiction, homelessness, and domestic violence. These are not criminal issues, these are social issues, and we're not using resources to address these social issues. The sales tax increase, it talks about how it's all going for your general fund.
30 seconds.
So most sales tax increases actually went for counties and went to increase transportation, improve transportation. We're not doing that here. It's all going to the general fund with no controls by the public how the money is going to be spent. I suggest people to vote no on Measure O. Your vote, I expect people to vote no on Measure E. Measure O, we approved and we're fooled. Don't get fooled again. Again, we're not receiving information, and the honesty of the city manager and the city and the city attorney can be questioned
Time's up.
because I ask questions, can't get answers. I ask for documents, they refuse to provide them. Thank you much for your time. Again, this is Larry Stein. Vote no on Measure E.
Thank you very much. And let's see, I've temporarily lost that list. Madam City Clerk, can you give me the next one and then I'll get the list back? It just disappeared on me.
Next is Chris Williams.
Chris Williams, that's correct.
Hi, Chris. You're live in the
Good
council
evening.
meeting. We have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Christopher Williams, and I'm a resident of Oxnard and president of the Oxnard Public Safety Managers Association. I'm speaking tonight in support of Measure E. Measure E is greatly needed for the health and sustainability of our city. I have strong roots in this community, and I'd like them to continue to grow, but I have big concerns with the health of our city if we have to keep on making cuts to public safety and other essential city services. I have confidence in our city manager and his staff to steer our city back on course, and I believe that Measure E will greatly help us. We can't keep taking cuts and expect to keep our city looking good and enjoy a safe and sustainable community. As city employees, we've done our part and we've taken concessions, but the city's budget can't be balanced on the employees' backs. We need help. If we continue to blame our employees and continue to expect them to take cuts, many of them will leave. Our police and fire personnel respond to more calls for service and are busier than any other city in the county, like the city manager pointed out. I don't think anyone enjoys paying higher taxes, but it is needed and greatly needed in our city. The last key point I want to make from the notes I took from the presentation from the city manager, Oxnard is the 18th largest city in the state. There are 127 cities that pay 9% or more in sales tax and 42 cities that pay 10% or more in sales tax. The benefit to this initiative is that the money stays in our city to help pay for our parks, our libraries, recreation, streets, and public safety. It will help keep our city safe and sustainable. We are on life support, and this initiative is needed to bring us back to life. My family and I are voting yes on Measure E, and I strongly encourage you, the Oxnard community, to do the same. Thank you very much for your time, and have a great evening.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Michael O'Malia, to be followed by Larry Barberine, please.
Hello.
Hi, Michael. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I stand tonight in favor of Measure E, and I'm proud to do so. I've been here since 1968 and have seen the city budget ebb and flow, but I've not seen the structural deficits that we face today and have faced in the last several years. Measure E would give the city a much needed financial anchor, one that has built-in accountability, so that all those who live, work, and play in this community would contribute to it. It would also provide a much needed basis for city leaders to plan for the future. We, all of us, pay taxes at the federal level and the state level and the county level. But the services we most use are the ones at the local level, and they must be funded locally. Services such as police, fire, EMS, parks, library, public works, planning, building and safety, disaster preparation. It takes all of these divisions to make a vibrant city, and I simply vote for a vibrant city. I vote in favor of a city that gives city leaders, such as yourselves and your department heads, a stabilized financial tool to continue to deliver to those services, aforementioned services such as police, fire and EMS response, and the dispatch systems that support them. These are desperately predicated on staffing levels, and also a financial tool for resources to deal with homelessness, plan for disasters, retain local business, and finally maintain city infrastructure. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to vote on this and choose the kind of city we want. I urge all to join me. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Larry Barberine, to be followed by Steve McNaughton, please.
Hi, Larry. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
And thank you, Clerk Michelle. As I'm assuming everyone does, we care about our police and fire protection and all these needs of the city. We just disagree. Those of us urging no on E disagree on how best to steward our funds and to finance these needs. It's been said on the days before that you can have a free lunch, but we're not looking for that either. It's just we've already paid for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. And let me detail that out, please. For one thing, this kind of tax is, despite the exceptions noted, normally hits the poor and the lower middle class more. Sales tax hits the poor and lower middle class more. The city manager mentioned that people aren't coming from farther away to come in to buy here just because we have our lower sales tax. But I can tell you for bigger ticket items, at least like cars, I might be thinking better about going to Ventura, Thousand Oaks to buy a car instead of the Oxnard Auto Center when it's another maybe $300 here or whatever extra because of our sales tax. And I've mentioned that to a friend of mine already who's thinking about buying a car, about this possibly the sales tax hike coming on. You have a $550 million budget already. Is it true? I don't know this, but is it true that you're planning $19 million, about $19 million over the next 4 years for salaries, more salaries and pensions? One of the council people said last week you're relying on this for the economic future of our city. If you got to rely on a certain sales tax for the economic future of our city, that shows the management is not there. We're already paying the highest, as Californians, we're paying the highest income and gas taxes in the country. Fourth highest state and local taxes combined. Eighth in sales tax, state plus, the average local sales tax, eighth in the country. This would help push that average local sales tax over the current average. Is this a failure for us to our lobbyists to keep and get the money back here locally? How about the League of California Cities? Are they lobbying to get some of that money back here from the state? You said that, it says this is for police and fire and all that, but I heard the senior commission last week talking about this new sales tax for the new senior center, and I just humbly asked, I don't know if this could happen, but to ask for like Kaiser or something like that to donate for the senior center. Why do you have to go back to the taxpayer all the time to help out the budget? I know you've done some cuts, but I'd rather some cuts with salaries and some employees, even if it's going to harm the general populace. You can't blame COVID either because it is putting a dent. But there is a problem caused by the lockdown with our finances. But every city is going through that, and
Mayor, that's time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
How you're
Thank you, Ms. Barbering. Thank you so much. And the next speaker is Steve McNaughton, to be followed by Douglas Portello, please.
Hi, Steve. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Thank you. Hello, Mayor, Council. My name's Steve McNaughton. I live and work in this community of Oxnard. I've been here for about 20 years. I'm raising my family in the city, and I want you to know that we have full-on trust in our current city management, and we understand that the passing of Measure E is vital to the success and the future of the city. It will help restore and stabilize funding for fire stations and our paramedic program. It'll restore and help stabilize the policing teams for our communities. And it will help us to develop programs to help our homelessness. It is vital that we have these programs in the city as the future comes. And as we go through this downturn in the economy, Measure E will help us get through that program. And I want you to join and know that myself, my family, and my friends and I are voting for Measure E in support. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And before I call on the next speaker, I'll read the next 10 names. Douglas Partello, Michael Velasquez, Kay Brainerd, Alex Mireles, Danny Carrillo, Matthew Ramirez, Helen Vicente, Randy Latimer, Edgar Fernandez, Debbie Estrada. So let's go to the next speaker, Douglas Partello, to be followed by Michael Velasquez, please.
Hi, Douglas. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Good evening, everyone. We do have a fiscal crisis, which has been exacerbated by the pandemic, not caused by it. You cannot solve financial mismanagement by adding more money to the problem. Marvin Boos and I have been going out and picking up trash, helping maintain public landscaping. We are doing our best to be part of the solution to make Oxnard better. We both agree there should be some response to make up for the shortfall the pandemic created, an increase of 0.5% over 4 years. That would give close to $50 million into the general fund as a response to this and some other needs we face. More than enough for that purpose. Asking for doubling our sales tax with no expiration to be used on anything they choose is just asking too much. We have a crisis of confidence in our city leaders to be good stewards of our money, more accountable and transparent. This measure provides no accountability. Remember Measure O? The Financial Oversight Committee had no teeth, just monitoring after the fact. The same holds true for this measure. The promises of Measure O have not come through in reality. There is nothing that gives us confidence in this measure doing what that one did not accomplish, just one bailout after another. If Measure O money was used to fix the roads in a timely manner, the costs we face today would be a fraction of what it takes to deal with them now. But that promise was not kept, and here we are. The more likely use of much of Measure E funds is to fill the black hole of pension debt, not potholes. I often hear it's the fault of past leaders, COVID, every excuse in the book. But we have 3 safety employee MOUs that gave pay increases in the form of increased health care premiums at a time when over 30 city employees were let go and a projected deficit of over $9 million, a reported 3-year cost of $5.5 million. The actual 3-year cost of taxpayers are on the hook for is $9.9 million. Simple math, and they couldn't get that right. After vetting the contracts through HR, city managers, city attorneys, and union reps and signed by the city council, a $4.4 million math error. Yeah, we have some serious concerns about trusting our city leaders, not past, but present, with managing our hard-earned tax dollars, giving them a blank check, and that's what it is. It's a blank check for an indefinite period of time, and doubling our tax burden is just a bridge too far. Timely adjust their priorities away from their own salaries, benefits, and pension, and back to providing the basic services we paid for and should expect. Take a look at transparentcalifornia.com and look at the employee salaries, and then look at your own paycheck. We can do better with our limited resources than pad salaries. Our pension debt is crippling. Look at the condition of our city. No on Measure E. Time for good stewardship, accountability, and true transparency. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Michael Velasquez, to be followed by Kay Brainerd, please.
Looks like it's going to voicemail.
Okay, and that was Michael Velasquez. So why don't we go to Kay Brainerd, please, to be followed by Alex Mireles, please.
Hi, Kay. You have
Hello?
3 minutes. Please begin.
Mayor and City Council members, I am asking everyone to vote for Measure E because these increased funds will allow the city to repair the roads and alleys, support the fire, police, and service departments, help the homeless and seniors, and allow construction bonds to be issued for needed buildings, like a new senior center. I'm voting for it because our city is one of the few cities in Ventura County that has not raised the sales tax rate. In our last audit, our budget said there was nothing to correct. We are moving forward. We who live in the city are not the only ones who will pay the increased tax. Tourists and people in neighboring cities will pay the tax increase along with us when they come here to stay, to eat, and shop. Remember, all this money raised will stay in the city of Oxnard. In the November election, I am only voting for people who are voting for Measure E. Please vote for Measure E. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Alex Mireles, to be followed by Danny Carrillo, please.
Hi, Alex. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Okay, great. Good evening, Mayor Flynn and council members. My name is Alex Mireles, a lifelong resident of Oxnard, Vice President of Labor's Local 585. We represent 500 union laborers that live in the city of Oxnard, and I'm here to speak in support of Measure E, which desperately needs to pass. The city needs the additional 1.5 cent sales tax to help generate revenues that are being lost during this current pandemic. Additional revenues are needed to help maintain our infrastructure, pave our roads, and to beautify the city. If the measure doesn't pass, our members will potentially lose local city construction jobs, won't be able to buy from local businesses, and have money to put back into our local economy. Without having additional revenues, our streets and infrastructure will only get worse. The revenues are needed for additional public resources, as stated in the city manager's presentation. We need to maintain jobs, attract local businesses. We strongly support Measure E in order for the city of Oxnard to secure its long-term financial stability. We urge the Oxnard community to vote yes on this important measure. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Danny Carrillo, to be followed by Matthew Ramirez, please.
Hi, Danny. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
I thought somebody's speaking right now.
Nope, the clock's ticking for you. Go ahead.
I hear Alex speaking.
So there's a delay on the broadcast,
Oh.
but it's actually your turn. So please begin.
Oh, okay. Good evening, Mayor Flynn, Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez, council members, city staff. My name is Danny Carrillo. I'm the regional director for SEIU 721. On behalf of not just our members who work and live in the city, but on behalf of all of our members who call Oxnard home, SEIU 721 stands in support of Measure E. Our members are proud and take great satisfaction performing their jobs, and more so in serving the public in this community. But with all the challenges we now face, having resources to provide these services is important. All city employees are essential workers, from water workers to planners and community development, to housing specialists, to librarians, to fire and to police. These are just some of the services that residents rely to be offered and available to them, and one role that local government plays. The city must be able to sustain itself for the common good. As a reminder, Oxnard is the largest city here in the county of Ventura, and as we all know, the city's budget must reflect proper resources to provide these essential services. We encourage all voters in the city to vote yes on Measure E. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Matthew Ramirez, to be followed by Helen Vicente, please.
Hi, Matthew. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Yeah, hi, my name is Matthew Ramirez. I just want to say, as a basically a lifetime resident, besides when I went up to school, I went up to school in the Fresno area, and at the time I thought it was a very similar community as here, and so I would basically say lifetime resident. I would say I'm in support of the 1.5 for what it offers. I would just say without the safety of our fire department, our police department, and things of that, without recreation, there really is no community, you know? And I would just say the 1.5 will make me feel like I'm part of a community, not just a resident. And simply said, that's how I want to put it. I want to be part of a community, so I'm full support of the 1.5. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Excuse me. And the next speaker is Helen Vicente, to be followed by Randy Latimer, please.
Hi, Ellen. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Hi. I believe that Measure E should be passed. An increased tax will maintain city services and enhance the community with the services provided from the tax increase. And I think that having city services is very important to the community because it makes everything a little bit more progressive, involved, so that we can reach out to the community in need, and these funds will help, with all of that. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Randy Latimer, to be followed by Edgar Fernandez, please.
Hi, Randy. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Hi there. Good evening, Mayor, Council. My name is Randy Latimer. I'm a lifelong resident of our beautiful city, and I'm happily retired from over 30 years of public service with our police department, and really have no intent on going anywhere. With that said, I'm calling in support of Measure E. Just like anyone else, nobody wants to be taxed. I don't want to pay any extra taxes. However, we can sit and point fingers, complain about increased taxes, but the mere fact is our city is in trouble and needs desperate help. And if we don't do anything, we're going to continue seeing cuts in police services, fire services. I'm involved with 2 of our critical youth programs in the city. I'm on the board of directors, and I've seen the positive impact of kids having a place to go after school or even when their parents are at work, and giving them a positive place, safe place to go is very important. Some of those kids I've seen are actually police officers, firefighters, and are giving back to our community. So to see those programs get cut, and I've been involved in budget cuts, been involved in budget cut exercises, and it's not a good thing to see. I've seen a robust police department, and with a very robust community policing program and the benefits of community policing, community outreach, and the impact that positive interactions between the police and our community have. To see those programs being cut as a resident, I don't want to see that. So myself, my family, we are in total support of Measure E, and we'll continue working to make sure this measure gets passed. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Edgar Fernandez, to be followed by Debbie Estrada, please.
Hi, Edgar. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and City Council. My name is Edgar Fernandez, and I'm a member of the Oxnard Peace Officers Association. And I'm here to speak tonight to you in support of Measure E. The value of Measure E is paramount to the success of the city moving forward. It's important for everyone to understand that fiscally and financially moving forward, we cannot continue to maintain the services that we have without Measure E. Measure E offers us the ability to restore some of the services that we lost and hopefully restore some of the personnel that we are losing due to budget cuts. We lost 17 positions at the police department last year due to budget cuts, and paramedic services were lost for fire services as well. Those things moving forward are only going to get worse if Measure E doesn't pass. Our need to restore things such as our neighborhood policing program, which had to be reduced due to our budget cuts, as well as our cold case unit had to be reduced due to budget cuts. Those are things we hope to restore. Those are things that our city deserves. I'll echo the sentiment of the city manager. Our city actually demands great service, and they deserve it. And Measure E is the way to ensure that. I agree wholeheartedly with the city manager that this community, its citizens, and everyone that works and lives in this community should demand excellent service, exceptional service, and they deserve it. But the only way to do that is with Measure E. There are certain people that don't believe that the money is going to go to the right resources. I will tell you right now, without Measure E, there will be no money. Nothing but cuts. There will be cuts to senior programs. There will be cuts to youth programs. There will be possible cuts to graffiti action programs. It will eliminate things throughout the city that the city does not deserve. The city deserves better. The city deserves the things that any large metropolitan city should have. I believe that Measure E, the Oxnard Peace Officers Association, as well as all the other employees of this city, believe that Measure E is vital to the future of this city. We need you to vote yes on Measure E. We're in full support of Measure E. We appreciate you giving us the time in this platform to get the citizens well informed and educated. on Measure E. Yes on Measure E for the future of Oxnard. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Debbie Estrada, to be followed by Karina Veronica, please.
Yes on Measure E for the future.
Hi, Debbie. If you could just turn your TV down in the background, and you have 3 minutes.
I got it.
Okay, here you
Thank
go.
you.
3 minutes.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council. This is Debbie Estrada. I'm an Oxnard resident, and I am in support of Measure E. Additional income to the city is important to keep the current services going and hopefully put the city back on track to begin bringing back programs and services that we've lost over the past few years due to cuts. If we as residents of Oxnard want to participate in these services and take advantage of the services that are available, then we can and should participate in securing them. I've seen way too many cuts in programs that are vital to our community, and I don't wish to see any more. So I urge everyone to vote yes on Measure E. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you very much. And the next speakers, I'll read out their names and then call them in twos. Karina Veronica, Tirza Estrada, Robin Whitney, Danny Victorio, Gabriel Teran, Alicia Purcell, Aaron Starr. And we'll go ahead then for the next speaker is Karina Veronica, to be followed by Tirza Estrada. And I don't know if that's Tila or Tirza. Thank you.
Hi, Karina. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Hi. Okay, I just want to say that I am, in support of the Measure E. I hope it passes because my family, my grandchildren, myself, we all take part in the city and some of the programs that they have, PAL, Turley, and the senior center, and it would be, good for the family, for my family, my kids, like I said, and the city to pass this measure. So that's all I have to say, but thank you very much for calling me, for having me on your meeting. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Tirza Estrada, to be followed by Robin Whitney, please.
Hi, Tirza. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of City Council. I would like to express my support for Measure E. The City of Oxnard has been discussing every budget cycle on how expenses are exceeding income brought in through revenues and tax sources. The residents of the City of Oxnard have benefited from free and low-cost services to the community for decades. The community comes together to participate in festivals, events, services for our youth, and want continued growth in this city. And to do so, the community needs to do its part. Currently, only 1% from the state sales tax stays local, in addition to the half cent from Measure O. If this additional 1.5% will allow city staff to continue services across the board, then it should be supported. Through COVID, we have seen departments like recreation work to keep the community safe. Now the community can work to help keep city services available for years to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Robin Whitney, to be followed by Danny Victoria, please.
Okay, it went to voicemail.
Okay, and let's go to, is it Robin Whitney or Danny Victoria? Robin Whitney, correct?
Danny is next.
Danny's next. Danny Victoria to be followed by Gabriel Turan.
Okay, voicemail again.
Okay, why don't we go to Gabriel Turan to be followed by Alicia Purcell, please.
Excuse me. Hi, Gabe. You have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Thank you, Michelle. Good evening, Mayor Flynn, Mayor Pro Tem Ramirez, council members, staff, and the members of the public. My name is Gabriel Turan, and I have been a nearly lifelong resident in the city of Oxnard. And I'm here to speak tonight in support of Measure E. And I just want to say that this is not an issue of doomsday predictions or rhetoric or trying to dissuade one side or the other. This is a simple issue of economics, of mathematics. If, as a city, we are spending more than we bring in, that's a structural deficit. We cannot be sustained by spending more than we bring in, meaning, like we did in the 1920 fiscal year, we have to cut our expenditures, the amount of money we're putting out, to match the amount of money we're bringing in. Having done that, we are now seeing the visual repercussions of that through overgrown landscape and a lack of maintenance in the parks. We can't blame that on the work ethic or on the attention of the city staff. The city staff is doing what they have the capacity to do based on the level of funding that we're providing for those services. In our personal budgets, we can't survive for very long spending more than we bring in every single month. We have to either make more money or cut our expenses. Right now, we are at a pivotal point as a city where we have to decide, are we going to stay at this level of funding as in our personal budgets? Are we going to continue at this level of spending where we cut these frivolous expenses or extra expenses? Or are we going to find a way to bring in more revenue? Again, in our personal budgets, you either get a better paying job, a second job, or find some other source of income to be able to do more things. For the city of Oxnard, in order to do more things, we need more revenue. There's no way around it. To say we need to better manage what we have, we are so thin, we are managing exactly what we have. Now, that being said, I will absolutely hold our city staff and our elected officials to please remembering that it is our obligation to our youth and to the future of our city that we restore the culture and community services that have been cut for the last 5 years as a result of our budget issues. We also need to restore our reserves that have been just dreadfully depleted. We can't sustain like this. If this measure passes, it is incumbent and an obligation of our city leaders to make sure that it is spent with transparency and with good fiscal management. I thank you for your time and have a good evening.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker is Alicia Purcell, to be followed by Aaron Starr, please.
Hi, Alicia, you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Thank you. Measure E is already on the ballot. This agenda item has absolutely no action for the council to take tonight. So the public really needs to ask, why is it even on the agenda at all? It's nothing more than a taxpayer-funded campaign event for Measure E with a parade of current and former city employees. The city manager is spending our money to argue to us that we should give him more of our money. That's pretty brazen. I have no doubt he will soon spend more of our money to send us campaign mail pieces, misusing even more taxpayer money. And this just demonstrates what little respect City Hall has for the taxpayers' money. So let's talk about the presentation. There's a slide of self-reported accomplishments, reasons why you say the public should trust you with more of their money. But it seems you forgot to mention that you gave out another $5.5 million a year of employee benefit increases right before announcing a $9.2 million deficit last year. But I guess you didn't want to brag about that. Slide 17 had a comparison of data points from Oxnard versus Thousand Oaks versus Camarillo. And the bottom row on that slide says that a 1% sales tax in Thousand Oaks generates $247 per resident. In Camarillo, it generates $219 per resident, but in Oxnard, it takes 1.5% sales tax to generate a similar result of $232 per resident. Well, that seems plausible since the average Oxnard resident has less disposable income to spend. However, Oxnard is already paying the higher 1.5% sales tax to generate that matching revenue, though the other two cities only pay the 1%. So you're proposing to increase it by another 1.5%. This will basically double the sales tax revenue per resident in Oxnard to a whopping $464. And because Oxnard is poor, you're going to charge them 3 times as much, the highest per capita tax rate, with no end date. So as a selling point, the city emphasizes, well, this money will be under local control. That's not really a positive thing for anybody that's seen the city's ugly audit reports. In a context where 3 or 4 audit findings in a year is a bad audit result, Oxnard has somehow managed to rack up 182 negative audit findings since 2014. That's what your local control gets us. If you really want local control, just let Oxnard residents keep the money in their own pockets. They can control it themselves on an individual level. How's that for local control? Lastly, to those who are advocating for the tax increase, I'll remind you, you're more than welcome to make donations to the city. There's no need to wait for the city to tax you. Just go ahead and write them a check and see if it makes you feel any better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Aaron Starr, please. Next speaker.
Hi, Aaron, you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Thank you. There's a reason why so many Oxnard City employees and retirees and their family members are speaking tonight. So if you take a look at slide 32, this is the slide which shows Measure E will bring in $40 million, and it claims that only 1.4 million of it will go to pensions. Well, this is misleading because it only reveals a small part of the story. Take a look at slide 36 to get more information. We've seen that slide before on July 7th staff report. And it tells us that over the next 4 budget years, with the current staffing and service levels, no new services, the general fund salaries and pensions will increase almost $19 million per year. That's about half the 40 million. Yet tonight, the city manager discloses only 1.4 million. That figure is only the pension portion in the next fiscal year. Actually, it's about 1.5 million. It ignores the $3.2 million increase in salaries for the same year. That figure ignores the growth in pensions and salaries for the next 3 years. This is why he conveniently didn't put a date on slide 32, because he didn't want to tell the whole story tonight. And pensions and salaries will continue to skyrocket after that, leaving no extra money for all the things he's promising you now. So regardless of what falsehoods the city tells you to get you to vote for a sales tax increase, the money will be very quickly used for salary and pension increases. Remember, there is no end date to this tax increase. It's permanent. The city will say it can be ended by the voters. How exactly do they do that? It has to be a ballot question, and the city will not put it on the ballot for you. No, the residents will have to spend their own money to collect a lot of signatures, petition signatures to qualify for the ballot. They will have to outspend the city during the campaign, and that assumes the city doesn't sue them, by the way, for collecting signatures and putting on the ballot. In other words, it's permanent. The city manager keeps comparing our total sales tax to other cities, and while that's interesting on some levels, it hides what is really happening here. The total sales tax rate includes what is charged by the state and the county and the city. Out of the current 7.75% sales tax rate, Oxnard's current portion is 1.5%. Measure E will double the city imposed sales tax from 1.5% to a whopping 3%. We will be tied with only 2 other cities for the highest city sales tax rate in the entire state. The majority of the cities in California, 260 cities out of 482, have only a 1% sales tax. So why is Oxnard so poorly run that it needs 3% to do the same job? This is inexcusable, and I urge you to vote no on Measure E. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Madam City Clerk, I think we had a few people that did not respond when they were called. And one of them, I believe the first one is, go back to it, Robin Whitney, and then Danny Victorio, I believe.
Yeah, just to make clear, they did contact us to let us know.
Okay,
that
good.
Okay. No, she.
Hello.
Hi, Robin. Hi, you have 3 minutes.
Yes.
Please begin.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, members of the City Council, staff, and Oxnard residents. My name is Robin Whitney, and I'm a lifelong resident of Oxnard and a member of the Oxnard Public Safety Managers Association. I'm speaking tonight as a concerned resident in support of Measure E. Our city has been enjoying some relatively low levels of crime. For some, it may be easy to think that Oxnard has always been a safe city. However, from having lived in the city for 50 years, I know that has not always been the case. Oxnard is a big city. With that comes big city problems related to public safety, such as gangs, graffiti, violence, burglaries, robberies, homelessness, drugs, and mentally unstable individuals. The relatively low crime rates that our city is currently enjoying are the direct result of the community policing efforts by the dedicated men and women of the Oxnard Police Department. However, the ratio of officers to residents in our city is extremely low, at about 1 per 1,000 residents. If Measure E does not pass, it is reasonable to expect police officers to possibly be laid off. Given that the police department resources have continually been reduced over the past decade, I feel that it's becoming more difficult for the department to keep the crime rates down. I feel that any further reduction of department personnel will inevitably result in our city becoming a more dangerous and less desirable place to live and work in. The cities of Santa Ana and Watsonville are sometimes used for comparison with Oxnard, given their very similar socioeconomic representations and demographics. For comparison, both cities have a sales tax rate of 9.25%. In closing, the fact that the City Council unanimously voted to put Measure E on the ballot demonstrates how critically important they feel this extra funding is for our city to responsibly provide the quality of services that we as residents deserve. I respectfully ask our residents to vote yes on Measure E so we can continue to have that quality of life for our community to enjoy. Thank you for your time and have a good evening.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker, Danny Victoria, please.
The Measure
Danny,
E.
hi, you have 3 minutes. Please begin.
Okay.
Danny?
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes. Did you want to Zoom?
Go ahead and state your comments. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Or whatever comment on the Measure E?
Yes.
Yeah, just go for it. Thank you. I'm with you. Oh, man. Lakers losing. Thank you.
Okay, thank
We're
you.
good. I'm good. You're doing a good job. Keep it up, guys.
Okay,
Bye-bye.
thanks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that ends the public comment. Is that correct, Madam City Clerk?
Yes.
Okay, very well. So what I'd like to do here is allow each and every council member to make comments. And basically, I think you could take up to 5 minutes, although 3 is preferred. But I want to make sure people have enough time to weigh in on this. And I'm going to start with Council Member Lopez, please, first.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you to our city manager for the presentation. I know that there's a lot of information for everyone to process, and I just hope that all our residents and all our voters in the city are paying attention to these details so that you're informed moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councilman Perrello.
I want to thank the city manager for making the presentation. I want to thank all the comments, positive and negative, and some, I'm not sure where they stood, but I want to thank all the comments. I'd like to address some of the things, and I'll start with something that, somebody may say that, well, where is he going this way? But I sit on a Public Works Committee, and they met this morning. And it was brought to our attention that we need some equipment for Public Works for some things that we're taking care of. And this particular one, I think everybody can relate to this. Each day in the city of Oxnard generates 88 tons of wet biosolids from the sewer department. Now, I don't want to get more explicit, but you can figure out what biosolids are. 88 wet tons per day. Has got to go somewhere. We can keep putting it in the backyard for a while, but eventually it's got to go somewhere, and somebody's got to take care of it. And there's a cost involved with all these things. Various people have said various things tonight, and I will agree with some of the detractors that there was a tremendous amount of people that work for the city of Oxnard, retirees and current employees that spoke. It sends a message that doesn't taste as good as it should, in my opinion. And I will get to that in a little bit. But a couple of comments that were made, I thought they were humorous, and I'm trying to make a point as one member of a 7-member city council representing District 1, but responsible for the entire city of Oxnard. There was a comment from one individual, and I thought it was well stated, but I have a question. The comment was, we've already paid for breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. Well, I'm curious. You're planning to eat tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. I don't miss too many meals. I don't know about you, but I got to pay for them. And if I don't have the money, I got to figure out how I'm going to get the money, or I go without the meals. We had another individual that talked about, well-known individual talked about fire stations and how a fire station that cost $20 million could have been built for 2. Please, Mr. Stein, come back and show us how it could have been built for 2. It was projected at 8. Numbers, facts, and evidence matters. There was another individual that talked about, we are continually giving away more and giving away more and giving away more. But the last that I remember, some of these individuals are retired from government work. They have pensions. I'm a retired rural mail carrier, an RCA. That means rural carrier associate. There's no pension with that. So I can speak freely on that one, ladies and gentlemen. When you dip from one side of the trough, you better take a look at what the hell the other side of the trough is doing. We all had opportunities to get the jobs that have these tremendous pensions, as we say. In my opinion, pensions do need to be revisited sooner than later. But we need to face reality. You're living beyond your means. And I'm mayor, I'll take my full 5 minutes. One of the ones that continually gets me, one of the main leaders and a citizen with all the rights of a citizen to live in this fantastic nation that we live in, Mr. Starr. With Mr. Starr, I always go back to one thing, and he's very gifted, very talented, holds a prominent position in a large company, local company. He's done some tremendous things. He's had some tremendous accomplishments. But I recall being one of 4 council members who was on a recall of a 5-member council. And when Mr. Starr could not count to 5, and he just counted 4, when all 5 voted for increasing the rates, I always have a little bit of a doubt on how he's spinning the numbers. The simple difference between 4 and 5 is not tremendously big, but it is significant. It's a fact. When we look at some of the issues that are going on with respect to why we would be doing this and who would be benefiting and some of the things, well, I recently had an opportunity to see something in the Star newspaper, and they're interviewing the people running for mayor, and the 2 that wanted to talk, they talked. The third party didn't want to be interviewed, apparently, from the newspaper story. And the former city councilman who was on the city of Oxnard council from 1996 to 2008, a period of time when I believe a lot of the seeds were planted for the problems that we have now. He's quoted in the newspaper as saying he will follow what the, let me get the actual quote here. Was asked a question. What is your position on Measure E, the initiative before Oxnard voters in November that would raise the sales tax by another 1.5%? They're asking a gentleman what his position is. He answered, I will support our taxpayers' response to the proposed Oxnard 9/11 safety, medical response, financial recovery, and accountability measure as proposed by the city of Oxnard. In other words, he doesn't take a position. I wonder if he votes. With respect to what's going on with the things we're trying to do with the sales tax and getting this, we're trying to get some sort of confidence in the public and in the outside investment world that if we are willing to pass Measure E and bring this upon ourselves and increase our ability, it's like a long-term investment. It will allow us to show that we have the ability to pay bonds in the future if we need works. There have been works that have been mentioned that need to be done. And no one tonight, I may have missed it, but I don't think so. I only took one bathroom break. No one is talking about Measure O sunset measure by Mr. Starr. If we continually put all of our money into attempting to get the roads, if Mr. Starr's one of his initiatives is successful, Measure O will sunset much quicker than 2029. And Measure E, if it doesn't fail, if it doesn't pass, it'll be a very interesting time. And I've told people, a couple have told me, you should shut up, Bert. What are you trying to do? You're going to be running again in 2 years. What are you trying to do? My fellow council members and ladies and gentlemen of the city of Oxnard and city of Oxnard staff, I will support Measure E. I believe our city has been living way beyond its means. I believe this manager and the people that he's brought into this city have made a tremendous difference in our city, a positive difference. Issues, facts, and events outside of our control have come and they have really impacted our city. It is showing things that have gone wrong. I think one of the best speakers tonight was Mr. Gabriel Charan. He laid it out very clearly. I hope someday to see him on the city council. If Measure E fails, I will promise you, I will do everything I can to protect the city of Oxnard moving forward. And that will mean having to support cuts that will be recommended. And those cuts, in plain English, make no misunderstanding of my words, those cuts are jobs. And I find it very funny that some of the most adamant anti-Measure E people can't get over the fact that what happened in the past, on various people's watches on the past, they expect the current city residents, council, and staff and management to pay for those deeds. I don't see how it works out. It's almost like not understanding the difference between the number 4 or number 5. Those are my comments, Mayor. Thank you. I support Measure E.
Thank you very much. Councilman McDonald. Okay, I'll go back to Councilman McDonald. Mayor Pro Tem. Oh, Councilman McDonald, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, too many buttons here. It's kind of a challenge for an older
It's okay.
person. This came forward to us as an informational item, and I really appreciate the fact and time and effort that everybody put into this. All the work, all the people that stayed up to call in, and all your comments. When I was asked if I would be willing to support this going to a vote of the public, I said certainly, let's go. So I will just say thank you to everyone for your participation, and I'm hoping that the voters do the right thing. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. And Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you very much. And thanks, everybody. I think even when people have criticisms or negative things, it provides an opportunity to really think about some of these things. I think the city manager's presentation was really so loaded with information about what services are provided now that I don't know, I know some of us have been in situations where we've had to call emergency services and the fire department come or the police department come. And I shudder to think if we didn't have those services available. Last year, we faced a really dreadful budget where we had to cut services. We were on the verge of cutting a fire engine, browning out an engine, and the consequences could have been really horrific for that community served by that engine. But we didn't, so we cut into our reserves, and we also had to lay people off. And I will tell you, in my 10 years of service, there is no question that was the most painful decision I have ever made here. we've made some hard decisions, but that was most painful, and the pain lingers. So the thought of having a budget that requires more layoffs, more cuts to services, and the inability to do the things that people call me for every day because we have no money for the park, the services, the whatever people need it's really just really tough. And I will say that before I came on council, I did not support Measure O because I didn't have a good understanding of what our finances were. And I'll tell you, it took a long time for us to really understand where our finances were. And that's why the audit has shown in the past so many material weaknesses. We didn't have good audits. Maybe didn't have good auditors. And maybe we didn't have the staff that really was helping us to understand. But that is the past. We have to go forward for our city. We are not a profit-making business. As Mr. Turan said, we can't go get another job. And as Ms. Purcell said, we can't depend on people's charitable contributions. People who work here have a right to be properly compensated, and that does include pensions. Everybody should have a pension. Everybody should have Social Security. Otherwise, we are leaving people to fend for themselves when they're the most vulnerable in their older years or disability. And that is just wrong. Someone mentioned the golf course. The golf course we have not sold it. It is a city property, and we have to pay for upkeep. We did not get an operator and say, okay, you pay for the upkeep and everything else. That's my understanding. Halico is under the control of the EPA. The city, for whatever reason, was stuck with this toxic waste pile, and the operators of Halico filed bankruptcy after they violated the Clean Air and Clean Water Act, and they left this city and the taxpayers everywhere holding the bag for cleaning it up. We haven't got the money to do that at this time. So again, we're not a business. We've made some very tough decisions, and as Councilman Perella said, some of us were subject to a recall. So we have not been afraid to do that because the majority of us have done the right thing for our city, and I hope we continue to do that. I will support Measure E. I hope the community does support it. I am very worried about not having the revenue to provide not even the extras that the people want, opening the Carnegie, more youth services, more cultural services, but also the basics that people depend on. When you call 911, you need rapid assistance. And if you don't get it, it's life and death. And that's our obligation. We can't pick and choose. We have to provide the services. So I will support Measure E, and thank you, Mr. Nguyen, for a very comprehensive presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And the next speaker will be Councilwoman Basua, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to thank Mr. Nguyen for the presentation today. A lot of information. I'm the type of person that in order to make a decision, I need to see the whole picture. I like to see what's the worst case scenario here in case this does not pass. I think that the city has put that on the table for us council members, and we should know that if this does not pass, we know we're going to have to make a lot of tough decisions. And I personally appreciate the presentation from staff today. And, you know, it's unfortunate, but, you know, if this does not pass for our city, it's the unintentional consequences that come along that we will be suffering the consequences too. So with that, I will leave my comments very short. I ask the public to please do your research. Let's make this presentation available, which I'm sure we will anyways, but and I just hope that the Oxnard taxpayers make the right decision for the city. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Madrigal, please.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone that spoke. Thank you to staff and city manager for the presentation. At the end of the day, you know, it was kind of laid out all possibilities that can and will happen one way or another. This is more information for the public to make an informed decision come November 3rd. And, you know, this just kind of shows the importance of voting one way or another. So please go out and vote November 3rd, either for or against Measure E. Thank you.
Thank you very much. At the very core of the city manager's presentation this evening is the issue of trust. And if people trust government and they participate in government and they're civically engaged, they will, I believe, make the right decision. If people don't trust government, which we heard speakers this evening that tend to not trust government. And government is a human endeavor. And because it's subject to the human condition where human beings make mistakes, there is cause for people not to trust government, not just the speakers this evening, but the public at large. And we know that the lack of trust in government is not unique to the city of Oxnard. It's widespread throughout the country. 10 years ago, we all learned, it was this summer, 10 years ago, we learned that through an investigation that there were decisions that had been made going back decades that could still cause many people to doubt and or to question or to not have the trust in Oxnard city government. And I will admit that not only as mayor for the last 7.5 years, but as a member of the council who ran for mayor in 2008, talking about there wasn't enough transparency. I lost as mayor. I ran in 2010, and it was in 2000. I ran in 2010, and it was at that time that it was revealed that there were a lot of decisions that were made in the city that, if not illegal, they were just outright unethical. And today we face the future. Today is a future decision that the voters will have November 3rd. And I just ask people just to consider this for a second. I have done everything in my power to try to restore trust and confidence in Oxnard city government. And I believe that this city council has done everything. Every member of this city council has put their best foot forward to gain the public's confidence. And most importantly, too, I think that this city manager who just recently celebrated his 2-year anniversary is as transparent as anyone is going to get about finances, about government. He's truthful, he's honest, he's direct. Sometimes he's not very popular or in the eyes of some people because he's very direct. I told him not long ago that he almost reminds me of a New Yorker in his directness and his personality. But this ultimately, this decision is predicated on whether the city, the people of the city of Oxnard are happy with the level of services that they're getting right now. If you are happy with the level of services that you're getting, if you believe that the city looks great, the trash problem, the landscape maintenance areas, the roadsides, and the other issues that we've had to deal with in the cutbacks, if you are happy with that, then by all means, you shouldn't vote for Measure E. If you're not happy with the level of services that you're getting, and the city is asking you to trust them or us, decision makers, that we are honest and we are making decisions in a very forthright and a transparent way, then you'll consider supporting this sales tax measure November 3rd when you have an opportunity to vote. And, you know, I have mentioned to the city manager in a private conversation, I did mention to my council colleagues when we place this on the ballot, that I think a mechanism that will not widen the gap of mistrust, but will bring the community closer to government. And the decision-making body is the word citizen participation, resident participation. And it's my desire to see, and I've let the city manager know this, I've let the council members know this, and members of the public, that I'd like to see more people civically engaged on this issue alone, on spending and what the city is spending. And we have a Measure O committee. A committee was an oversight committee. My concern about that committee is, or was, it still is that the committee would find out about the expenditure after it was made, and then they'd render a judgment as to whether or not it was fulfilling the intent of Measure O. And I'd like my council colleagues, not tonight, it's not agendized, but as a mechanism of further building trust with the community, that there is a committee of citizens, of residents of this great city, and that they will have an advisory role. They will not have a veto role, but they'll have an advisory role before Measure E expenditures are made. You know, if this was a specific purpose tax, we were to say it's going to go just to the library or just to parks, you probably wouldn't need that kind of thing. You would just have an audit, and the audit would say, yep, they're spending the money exactly where they're supposed to be spending the money. But in a general sales tax, it's open how the money can be spent. So members of the city council, members of the public, the staff, Mr. Nguyen, I think that from my perspective, there's no question whether the city of Oxnard needs this, and the full operation and the delivery of services to the public, whether we need this or not. The issue here tonight is about trust. And I strongly urge this council, I won't be in a position after December 8th, I think it is, to be a part of a decision for a committee. But I strongly urge this council and to consider that we need a oversight committee. That oversight committee would be an advisory committee. And maybe just to make the business of government more efficient, it would be very similar to the role that the council has, that the city manager has a certain spending authority, that not each and every penny that is spent, because you would probably have to have meetings, several meetings a week on occasion with that oversight committee, but that in ending to my end point here is that we need to bring people closer to government, not push them away from government. We need to be ever more transparent, and we need to be above any doubt that people have that this government is a government that you can trust. And I'll just end my comments that way, and I'll ask the city manager if he'd like to make any final comments.
Mayor, I'd like to have a comment, please.
Yes, Councilman Prello.
I appreciate all the comments from the public and the council tonight. Your suggestion is a good suggestion. I wish you would have advocated that when we were discussing putting this on the ballot.
I did.
I really wish you would, and I wish you would have pushed it as more forceful as you are tonight. But this is my comment. The mayor, the city manager has mentioned that we hold the public holds the city manager accountable, and the city council holds the city manager accountable. The public holds the city council accountable. But ultimately, it's the residents of the city of Oxnard. And I've had numerous residents, Mayor, ask me a question. Why don't we just declare bankruptcy and start all over? I'd like to get somebody to address that tonight. Chief Financial Officer, City Manager, maybe yourself, Mayor, but I'd like to get somebody to address that, because I've been asked that on more than one occasion. Thank you, Mayor, for letting me ask that question.
I'll defer to Mr. Nguyen. I certainly would have some comments on that, but Mr. Nguyen, Councilman Perello has raised a question, and you're the CEO of this corporation. You're first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will address that question, and then if you don't mind, we have a couple of comments that we would like to respond to in addition. So through the chair, Councilmember Perello, your question is, why don't we just declare bankruptcy? Well, I'm not a municipal bankruptcy expert, and frankly, I hope never to become one. But there are a couple of case studies in California that we can turn to. And the bottom line is, you can just go and ask the cities of Stockton and San Bernardino how it went for them. a couple of things I will say about bankruptcy is, first of all, you can't declare bankruptcy until you're actually on the verge of bankruptcy, which we are not. And I stated before, I'm not giving a gloom and doom scenario here. I'm just being realistic and pragmatic about our circumstances. But bankruptcy, you can go through that, as a few cities in California have done. And when you come through it, your underlying problems that caused you to get there don't just magically disappear, number one. Number two, the courts have already reaffirmed this, that just declaring bankruptcy does not absolve a city of its pension obligations. So there you have that. So you come out of it and you still have your pension obligations. Other thing is, during that process, a court or a judge is likely to assign someone akin to a receiver to make all of your decisions for you. And that person is likely not to even be from your community, certainly not an elected official, and certainly not your city manager or a new city manager. So think about that. But here's the bigger thing for me. It's telling us to declare bankruptcy is like telling someone who's suffering from the flu to commit suicide. That cure is worse than the flu, than the disease. It makes no sense. So that's my answer about bankruptcy. Now, if you don't mind, there are a couple of items we do want to address that came up through the public comments. I'm going to start by asking the police chief to address the question about overtime, and then there are a few items I'd like to address. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you, Mayor, City Council. There was a speaker that made some comments about overtime that were just not accurate, kind of misleading. So I appreciate the ability to come up and make some comments. We've been watching over, like every other department that takes these budget challenges seriously, we've been watching overtime in the police department like a hawk. Overtime is at its lowest level that it's been in the last 10 years. It's about 4% of our overall budget. So when you run a 24/7 operation, that's actually a fairly low number. Much of the overtime that we have is actually reimbursed. So every DUI checkpoint that we run is reimbursed from the state through grants. Our gang violence suppression overtime that we use is reimbursed by the state with the grant. And then there's different types of overtime. There's the officer that gets a subpoena to go to court on his or her day off. There's just no way around that. You can't limit that. There's the type of overtime that maybe we share with Public Works, where if there's an emergency, we have to come out. It's cheaper to actually have an officer respond in an emergency rather than staff it 24/7. So for us, an emergency would be a murder, rape, robbery, a shooting, a stabbing, a gang assault. It's cheaper for us to actually call those detectives in on overtime than to staff it 24/7. It's just cheaper to do it that way. Another type of overtime that is comparable to the fire department is when you have minimum staffing. And we have some shifts where 10 officers is the minimum staffing. And sometimes it's cheaper to have 10 officers work it and then fill in the gaps when you have a gap. And sometimes the gap is only 4 hours or 6 hours. It's cheaper to do that on overtime than to actually overstaff. And then there's sometimes when you need it. So that's the type of overtime we have. We watch it very closely. There's no discretionary overtime within the police department. I don't think there's any for any of the other departments either. So thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Mr. Mayor, just a few quick comments from me to conclude. I want to start with this interesting criticism about city employees and or their families who've taken the time to express their opinions as residents. And I find that, frankly, just offensive. You know, in many cities, people like to complain that their police officers or their firefighters or their other staff don't live in the cities where they work. That's a very common complaint. And here we have a good number of employees who actually live here, many of them for basically a lifetime. They raised their families here. And because of that, they don't have a right to be a full citizen of this community, and that they and their families can't express their opinions. That's offensive. So with the accusation that I'm being brazen by asking the council to put this on the ballot, you know what? It'd be brazen if I were to sit here and smile and tell everyone that everything's just going to be okay. That would be brazen. As I stated, I'm just being pragmatic and being realistic about the situation. Now, the complaints about being misleading about the pensions, I was responding to a question about how the Measure E funds would all go towards pensions. And that's what I addressed. So it's interesting to accuse me of hiding the balance of the pension when you also claim it was on a prior slide. If I was trying to hide anything, I certainly didn't do a good job of it if it was on a prior slide in the same presentation. I was simply focused on the Measure E portion. There's also clearly some sentiment from some quarters of the community that public employees shouldn't get paid well. But here's the thing. First of all, as I keep trying to explain to everyone, we compete for talent. We compete for public employees. We compete against other cities and counties throughout California. Many of the people who work here have a choice. So if we can't pay what the going rate is, we're not going to get the best talent and the best people. And my question is, do you really want an organization that is akin to the Bad News Bears? Do you want an organization where people are managing your finances, or where people carrying guns and badges who are second rate, who couldn't make it in other cities? Because that's what you would get. And the last thing I want for this community are second rate police officers, because that's going to buy you the trouble in the future that we're seeing in many other cities in the country right now. We have a great public safety departments here, and we want to keep them. And part of that means we have to pay competitively. That's just a fact. We operate in a labor market. We do not operate in a vacuum. And then to claim that we would have the highest city sales tax rate in the state, and that why can't we do what other cities can do for a lesser amount? I tried to explain that because we don't have the same levels of property values. We don't even get the same levels of sales tax revenue. If we could do it differently, we wouldn't have to do it this way. But the reality is this is a working class community, and this is the easiest way to pool the resources for the entire community to benefit, especially those in the lower income brackets. They actually need these services that we're unable to provide right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councilman Perrello, you had some additional remarks to make? Or
Finished, Mayor. Thank you.
okay,
I didn't take the hand down. Sorry.
very well. Okay, thank you. Any other council members have any comments of any kind? Okay, with that being said, I mean, I believe this is basically a receive and file report. That concludes this special meeting. I'm very glad that we had the opportunity to address this at a reasonable hour, 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock. And I think it's one of those mechanisms of continuing to build trust with the public. So with that being said, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Night.